Hello, welcome to Our Revolution Washington's weekly town series hall. Today we will be talking about permaculture. Rhonda will not be joining us this evening, but we have Amber King here as usual and Oz behind the scenes. And today we have a special guest, John Liu. Sorry about the stumble on your name. Very excited, and I'm going to just toss it right to Amber to get started. Thank you.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. It's Amber. Thank you for joining us on our Saturday night town hall series. This is with Our Revolution, Washington State. We have a couple slides if you'd like to say. Tonight's talk is going to be Earth Day Green Global Actions. So we not only want to have a wonderful conversation about planetary opportunity and actions happening across the globe, but we also want to bring it very local and be able to talk some of the amazing things that we can do right here at home during this pandemic time. So welcome, John, to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
So, and you are joining us tonight from sunny California.
Well, it's late evening or evening. The sun is going down, but it has been a really hot, sunny day.
Fantastic. And so you have been working, we have actually a wonderful little video clip that we can play for you. That is some of your work. You are first and foremost a filmmaker, but you are also an ecological ambassador with Common Land. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that while we get your video set up?
Okay, well, I've been working with the Common Land Foundation for about 11 years now. It wasn't the Common Land Foundation when I started. I actually, the founder of the Common Land Foundation was the head of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature in the Netherlands. And I began to work with IUCN and created this film in 2009. So you'll see that. That was 14 years after I started to study ecology. So I had a long time as a journalist before that, and then I became a full-time ecological researcher. And that's what I've been doing ever since.
Wonderful. Well, let's play your video and introduce everybody to the amazing work that you have done.
Thank you.
This is China's Lus Plateau. Until recently, this was one of the poorest regions in the country. A land renowned for floods, mudslides, and famine. But with the fanfare comes the hope of change for the better. My name is John D. Liu. I've been documenting the changes on the plateau for 15 years. I first came here in 1995 to film an ambitious project where local people were constructing a new landscape on a vast scale, transforming a barren land into a green and fertile one. The project certainly changed my life, convincing me to become a soil scientist. The lessons I've learned in the last few years have made me realize that many of the human tragedies that we regularly witness around the world, the floods, mudslides, droughts, and famines, are not inevitable. Here on the Lus Plateau, I've witnessed that people can lift themselves out of poverty. They can radically improve their environment, and by doing so, reduce the threat of climate change.
That is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your work with us. I know that many of us have been following your work for many years throughout the last couple decades. And how have you seen some of the changes that have happened in ecological restoration projects around the world before we get started into some of your work with the ecosystem restoration camps?
Yeah, well, I think that what's interesting about this is that we can see at a very large scale. So the landscape in the Lust Plateau in China was the pilot project was 35,000 square kilometers. So that's approximately the size of Belgium. And the entire Lust Plateau is 640,000 square kilometers. So that's approximately the size of France. And in doing this work, the realization that it was possible to restore hydrological cycles and hydrological function at scale is quite important. And then to realize that that requires you to lower the surface temperature, massively increase the organic materials in the soil, which restores the microbiologic communities, and to create a canopy that is creating a microclimate below the height of the canopy. So the higher the canopy, the interruption of solar radiation takes place, and then that microclimate then is controlling the temperature on the surface. It's controlling all this, and wherever you've lost that, then you have massive degradation, and the temperatures are elevated, the evaporation rates are elevated, the infiltration and retention of moisture are lost. And when when I started to study this and began to understand it, I just found that this was much more important than anything else I'd ever seen in my life. And so for the rest of my life, I'm forced to follow this inquiry. But I realized at some point that as an individual, it's pointless, because it isn't individuals who decide the outcome. It's human civilization and society. So I began to understand that we're required to go from ego to eco, and from me to we. And that's kind of where I've been now, is trying to understand the dynamic of how the society understands things, so that the things that I understand it's not very interesting to consider my work as a, individual academic thing, because it's pointless that way. It only makes sense if everybody on the planet understands what I've been learning, and they agree to it, and we all work together to restore ecological function on a planetary scale.
That is amazing. So in the last few years, you've been doing this work for quite some time. Have you seen the shift in focus for local, not only groups, but some of the changes I think we've seen a renewed interest in fighting for, doing the right thing. We work a lot with our revolution in getting money out of politics and progressive policies. However, we're still coming up against that, especially in the ecological and environmental world, that we can't just be single issue candidates. Do you see that in other continents and countries where you have your camps?
Well, I think that the very first thing that I noticed was that science basically agreed with the thesis and the study that I was making. So when that happened, I realized that meant that policy had to change. And what I saw first was that the Chinese had the evidence. They looked at the evidence and they said, well, this is quite clear. We understand that the hydrological cycle is connected to the percentages and total amounts of organic material, and that the water is stored in the biomass. 70% of your body is water, and that's true for all the vegetation and everything, all living things. So when the Chinese started understanding that they changed their laws. They made it impossible to destroy ecological systems, and they put the entire population toward understanding and to restoring ecological function on on a nationwide scale. Now that happened quite a long time ago. So China has a big head start in restoration, but it was very seriously degraded before. So now if they have 20% or going to 30% vegetative cover, they're still behind a lot of other places, but they're rapidly restoring. So this is quite interesting. And that also might correlate to the time, or does correlate to the time, that China was becoming more wealthy. So the relationship to poverty and affluence. So this suggests that true value comes from ecological function. Now, when I started to go internationally around to do this, it was Africa first, where I was sent, basically, the Global Environment Facility and the World Bank and the British government asked me to go to Africa back in the 2005. And when I did that, first of all, I'd gotten a fellowship from the Rothamsted Research Institute. And it was funny because I didn't really know much about Rothamsted, but I met the director and some other people. So that was wonderful. And then they gave me this wonderful fellowship. And then when I went to Africa, I was introduced as the Rothamsted International Fellow for the Communication of Science. And although I didn't know very much about Rothamsted, the Africans knew all about Rothamsted. So it was like, oh, he's from Rothamsted. It was kind of funny. And so in Rwanda, they changed their laws. So there's 14 years or 15 years of data now on what happens if you change your laws and you do restoration. And then in Ethiopia, they shifted the food aid, which was coming from the 80s, where there was mass starvation in Ethiopia. The result, or the international relief effort, was food. We'll send you free food. Well, that turned out to be genetically modified soy cornmeal. And so it's really a subsidy for farmers in the United States who are producing that kind of food-like substance, which is not really wanted by anybody who understands it. I mean, I wouldn't want to eat that, and I wouldn't want to give it to even animals. So, the interesting thing about that is that they were giving it to the poor people instead of fixing the problem. And the problem got worse because when you have free food, then you don't have any agricultural activity and you don't have any market activity. So that all shifted and changed to sustainable land management. When that shifted to sustainable land management, again, 15 years of data now available to look at what happens when you restore ecological function. So we all need to look at those models: China, Rwanda, Ethiopia. And when that happened, I started to think, okay, now maybe the institutions are going to restore the whole earth. We're good. But that didn't happen. And that's why the camps movement comes into play. Should I keep talking, or is someone going to ask me something?
Thank you for your response. Amber?
Yes, I'm having a slight feedback issue. So I thought we'd stop for a second and see if that resolves itself, or maybe it's one of Oz's studios that happens to be feeding back. But occasionally these things do happen.
For the record, I don't hear any feedback.
Me either. No feedback.
So hopefully it's not broadcasting.
I don't think so.
No, cast is fine.
Hi, Oz.
Hello there. Yeah, you're coming out fine across the stream, guys. So it's at your end, Amber.
So Amber, do you want me to continue? And I can just I'll tell you what so after having those early institutional things, but it didn't really take off everywhere in the world, I noticed that more and more it's in policy. Certainly the science is aligning with this. And what's interesting is that it didn't it wasn't promoted everywhere in the world because it actually suggests a lot of things about the economics. It suggests that the economics are kind of false in the existing paradigm because they don't value ecological function. So the existing economy, the existing monetary system values things over life. So life is less valuable than stuff. And this is simply untrue. So if you have such a philosophy or illogical premise at the center of security that's supposedly protecting human civilization, then you're in real trouble. And so I don't think that that's, we're seeing like a different problems like climate change or biodiversity loss or toxicity, and now the COVID-19 sort of pandemic responses. And when you see this and you understand that, oh, the existing economy, the existing system is encouraging the destruction of the ecological functions on a planetary scale and calling that wealth creation. Well, it's not wealth creation. It's materialism to a few, a tiny minority, and it's mass starvation and poverty for billions of people at the edges of large degraded ecosystems. So if you live my life and you go around with a camera to the deserts and the miserable people and revolutions and stuff all over the world, then you see, well, that's not true. This is not wealth. This is poverty. We're creating poverty, and somebody's getting something, but it's not uniformly distributed around the world. And we have now 7.7 billion people. We're adding 1 billion people every 12 years. This is a crisis. And when it comes to a head, then the existing system fails, and because all systems that are, corrupt and useless fail. So, when you have such a phenomenon, something has to replace it. So I started thinking, well, I don't want to be anywhere near this giant edifice which is corrupt and is failing. I want to get away from it. We need to work together with those who understand, and we need to look at with compassion at both the victims and the perpetrators of this, because they're all victims. Everybody who's failing to be joyous and experience love and happiness and the beauty of the earth is not having a good time and is participating in something which is going to hurt their children and future generations and the earth. Well, that's not a good idea. So let's have fun. And when I thought, well, what do I like? And I said, I like camping. I like nature. I like planting trees and restoring soils and water that flows, beautiful waterfalls and streams. And so I thought, oh, and I had a dream for a while of like people are going camping and we're fixing the world. And then I rejected that because I said, well, who's going to do that? Nobody will listen to me, and it's impossible. But then when I started writing about it, then thousands of people started to say, I'm having the same dream. I thought it was a movie. It was like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and we were all taking our potatoes and mashing, putting them into giant mountains and and so everybody was having the same dream. And then I said, okay, I got to take it seriously. So I started talking about it more and you should go to ecosystemrestorationcamps.org when you want to learn more about this. But when I started to talk about it, we said, okay, if 1,000 people will share 10 euros per week, 10 euros per month, which is 120 euros per year with this thing, then we could start a foundation and create these camps. And then a young man and young woman were getting married, and they asked their wedding guests, not to give them gifts, but to endow this new foundation, the Ecosystem Restoration Camps Foundation, So the Ecosystem Restoration Camps Foundation was founded on love. And I think that's a really important point.
That is amazing.
Yeah, it is. And then when 1,000 people pledged to share 10 euros per month, we said, okay, well, and this couple gave their wedding gifts to the foundation. We started the foundation. And then we started talking about, well, okay, where should we put the first camp? We didn't really quite tell anybody exactly where, but we started discussing the Altiplano in Spain, where Common Land has a sort of 1 million hectares under restoration. So it's a really big project. And so the Common Land Foundation had this other project, which was very big and lasts 20 years. So it's not going anywhere, and had a lot of participation from the local governments and from the local farm cooperatives. There was a new cooperative created called Alvalal. And when we started talking about this, we didn't really tell people where it was. And people started doing research on the internet, and then they started arriving at this place and saying, here we are to build the camp. And we're like, what are you talking about? The camp is not here yet. You're not supposed to do that at this time. But they showed up, and then there have been over 400 volunteers over the last few years who have worked on building that camp. So that first camp, 3 years ago, we had one camp in Spain that was built by all these amazingly good researchers who found out how to go to some place where we didn't even tell them where it was. And then the second year, we had another camp form in Mexico. It's called Via Organica in San Miguel de Allende. And this is a very interesting place because it was already there. It had a farm and a training center and a store and a restaurant. It's beautiful facilities, all organic, wonderful. And so when that happened, we started seeing, oh, that's really good. And so suddenly all these other places that already exist started joining and becoming ecosystem restoration camps. So we went from one camp in the first year to 2 camps in the second year to 23 camps in the third year. And I think there are 50 or 100 waiting to become camps now. So this is, it's in 6 continents. So it's all over the world. We're not seeing that this is one country or another. This is the desire of the human population.
That is amazing. We actually have a clip we were going to show of you talking about a new re-envisioned wealth system and some of the problems with our existing structures. And we'd love to play that video and then talk more about the eco camps after.
The world is facing multiple problems. We have biodiversity loss, climate change, desertification, food insecurity, poverty, disparity, and now the threat of financial collapse. It seems like there are 2 conversations going on, one in the developed world, which is talking about economics and technical solutions, and another one in the developing world, which is talking about survival and sustainability. I've begun to see this differently. When it comes to survival and sustainability, there's only one story for the human species, and we're all in this together. All our problems are interrelated. Far from being mysterious, they're actually the logical outcomes of the type of economic system that we've created.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire,
and this also seems to point toward the solution. We know when we see a forest, a lake, the ocean, a natural river system, the atmosphere, that it's more valuable than computers, cars, or airplanes, which are valuable for a short time, but then become trash and pollution. Natural systems are renewable. They've evolved over billions of years, and they are infinitely valuable. Now, the global economy values production and consumption. And although few understand it, speculation. this has suggested the finite derivatives shaped from the Earth's natural systems are somehow more valuable than the infinitely renewable systems themselves. This is simply wrong. We need to admit that we made this mistake. If we were to truly value natural systems, then nature would become the basis of our money and our economy. To protect nature then would not be a luxury, but a necessity. This brings us much closer to the truth because we must have water, air, and fertile soils. But we just want computers, cars, and airplanes. We can change. It will not be easy, but we can and we must do it. I think there are two possibilities. If we are thoughtful and do the right thing, then we can consciously transition to a new paradigm in which human actions and the natural environment are in harmony. The other possibility is that the current system implodes from its own corruption and mistakes, and we're forced to try to salvage whatever we can of human civilization. For the sake of the children and future generations of life, we need to consciously decide to do the right thing. When we do that, we'll understand that wealth is coming from natural ecosystem function. And this will be the basis of our money. And all human actions will go to conserving and protecting and restoring ecological function on Earth. We need to shift societal intent away from the production and consumption and waste of the economic system as we see it now, and realize that wealth is coming from natural ecosystem function. If we run out of water, if we run out of fertile soils, if we run out of air, if we alter the climate, our money is worthless. We have to understand that the true wealth on the earth is coming from natural ecological function. And if we do this, if we choose this, then our money and our economy will reflect that. And all human activity will go toward conservation and, wherever the land is degraded, restoration. Because that's the way to protect wealth, and that's the way to increase wealth.
I absolutely love that video. That is a lot of what we talk about here at our Revolution Washington. And the idea and the foundation for the ecosystem restoration camps is just amazing. I recently saw that you had proposed pitching them for Burning Man this year. And as somebody who frequents many festivals and that communal lifestyle of being able to celebrate and work on projects together, that was very exciting for me. Have you been able to make any connections while being quarantined in California on that?
Oh, well, yes. Burning Man, I was able to speak to the leadership council at Burning Man. They've accepted the concept. We are in discussions for different things, but I actually came to the feeling this time that I've been here in California and a little bit trapped, and I came to realize that the situation in the United States is high risk right now, and so we need to address the hunger issue as soon as possible, because if we don't, then you'll have a series of feedback loops which will be quite severe. And I think if we can address the hunger situation first, then we don't have desperation. We don't have the negative feedback loops. And then all of those people who are assisted from and kept from becoming desperate, they actually could join ecosystem restoration camps. And in all of us, and I highly recommend that you all become members. Become supporting members of the ecosystem restoration camps movement, because it's inexpensive. It's the most inexpensive thing we can do, but it's the most effective thing we can do. Because if we all are encouraging and we realize that there's no way there's no way I, as an individual, can restore the Earth's ecosystems. But humanity together, that we can do. And if we do this by choice, and we don't do this because governments or international institutions are telling us to do it, but we do it because we choose to do it, we own it. And this is about sovereignty. This is about autonomy. This is about human rights. And all over the world now, in the Middle East, in North Africa, in sub-Saharan Africa, people are going, well, we could start ecosystem restoration camps and we could restore the Earth systems. And then what happens? We get food security. We get our land back. We have a say. We're powerful. But if we don't do this, we're starving at the edges of degraded landscapes, or we're trying to flee to Europe or somewhere else as refugees. So this is the least expensive and the most effective way to go. And for the first world, we need to, or what has been called the first world, the developed world, we need to reduce our consumption, reduce pollution, and realize that a lot of the privileges and benefits are not natural. They've come through genocide of the native populations, or slavery, or colonization. And these things are, not the best moment for humanity. And what we need to do is it's not about blame and retribution. It's really about truth and reconciliation. Because if we don't address it in this generation, it just goes to the next generation. But I don't think there's a chance for that anymore, because we're at the crisis point. So here at the crisis point, we have an opportunity to decide, what do we believe in? What are our intentions? And if our intentions and our belief system says, well, life is better than corruption and ignorance and kleptocracy, then, great, let's do that. And then from that point, we have to say, well, what are we going to do? Well, you're going to have a lot of people who are hungry right now, because the material wealth has been stratified, and there are a lot of people with nothing, and they're going to be homeless and helpless, and they're going to need a lot of help. So the first thing is deal with that. And then from that point, you have to say, well, what are we going to do together? Now we've got everybody fed, everybody's taken care of. What are we going to do? What are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to be restoring the hydrological cycle. We're supposed to be restoring the soil fertility. We're supposed to be restoring all the vegetation and the biodiversity. And we're supposed to treat everybody with respect and equality. That's what we're supposed to do.
Yeah, I've found that there's quite a bit of healing that needs to happen because of our toxic food supply that we've had here in the United States. And I do see we have a couple questions, and want to give Courtney an opportunity to hop in here and ask them.
Yes, there is one from Franklin. There are a few, but one from Franklin is, have you thought about the mindful integration of technology into your camp ecosystems?
Yes, of course. I think we have to be very conscious. We don't want to lose the technical advances that have been made. We're using this wonderful technology to communicate. We're still all in isolation, and yet here we are talking to one another. But on the other hand, we need to understand the difference between abiotic and biotic systems, and realize that there's a very important aspect of biotic systems in that they are primary systems. So if I'm a researcher and I go out to someplace and nobody's been there forever, and for a long time, and I find the ruins and sift through the ruins of a civilization, I'm a primary researcher. That's primary data. If I read the work of somebody who went out there, that's secondary data, and that's colored by the writing and the opinions and the knowledge and the ability of the researcher. So it's quite different. And primary systems are the ones which give us life, and they are the basis of wealth and health and life. And then abiotic systems are systems which we enjoy because we've created something which is convenient or useful, and we need that. but we need to put it all into perspective. So yes, but I guess is my answer.
So we have another question from Lael, and she's asking, how do we do without computers and air travel? I think a lot of people assume if we're going back to nature that we lose a lot of our advancements.
Well, I don't think we do without air travel or computers. I think we use computers and air travel, but we're very judicious about it. That we don't do it frivolously. We do it
Exactly.
very carefully for what is needed.
And I suggest that we create these things in more sustainable ways. We don't have to keep creating them in the ways we're doing. We can make these things sustainable in and of themselves.
Yeah, this also has to be a profound and nuanced conversation, because when we talk about, say, wind energy or solar energy, there's a tremendous amount of embedded energy in these things. There's a lot of very serious mining that's going on for all sorts of things there. So we need to use it judiciously.
And I really love that the camps are self-organizing and governing and completely autonomous. And that to me is a very beautiful thing, that anybody can just join or donate or start one. You see this map of the world, and there's definitely some open areas. You know, we're fortunate to be in the Pacific Northwest, where things mostly grow fairly easy, but we know the damage that's being done to our soil and the opportunity to restore that in the name of the environment and climate crisis. Along with this pandemic, you know, I also see a very, very big opportunity to really jump on many of the ways that we've wanted the world to be created for a long time. So I'm really excited to get more involved with you and some of the media projects that you're doing. And you know, hopefully we all learn from each other, and I can't thank you enough for joining us tonight.
Well, thank you so much. It's been my pleasure. It's kind of lonely out here, so it's really nice to have someone to talk to. Thanks very much. I'm a big talker. It's hard to get me to stop.
We were counting on that, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure on our end.
Thanks so much.
Yes, we end up with lots of political candidates, so you're in the right company, and it's a refreshing topic. And we're gonna share another few pieces of your work throughout the show tonight, and you're welcome to stay if you have to go. We understand that as well. We want to tell everybody watching the live feeds, thank you for hitting like, sharing, having the great conversation that's happening online. And there's many ways, of course, you can support our work through our revolution, through Uphill Media. We are working on a federated independent media network that we can help share and make sure information is getting out along the airwaves, not only in times of uncertainty like this, but in general. We're finding that the need to have that information in an accessible form that's free and available to the public is much in need for these conversations. So thank you, everyone.
And remember to hit subscribe and like.
Okay, I'll do it.
Thank you so much for being here. And as we said, you're welcome to stay. And of course, we understand if you choose to leave the Zoom conference.
Well, I need to move inside now. The darkness is falling, and so I'm going to have to move my equipment in, but I'll leave it running and watch for a bit. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And fantastic. You're also able to watch on the YouTube. If you mute it, you can watch on the live stream and interact with some of the people that are commenting as well, which is kind of fun for our live stream viewers. But the wonderful thing about this is it lives in perpetuity on YouTube as long as we can keep it there. But we're also hitting out on other streaming services. We've got it out on Twitch tonight. We have it on Periscope and of course on Facebook. So we're really happy for everybody enjoying us, and thank you for participating and enjoying the rest of our show tonight. So we do have quite a few pieces. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the kind of larger scale aspects in which things like permaculture and gardening and kind of, these movements, we really wanted to focus on, how, not only the interconnectedness of our food supply, the people who work and grow our food, but also unionizing efforts and, of course, living wages for the people who are making this food, especially during this pandemic. So love the Our Revolution artwork that just speaks so near and dear to my heart, knowing, having a culinary background and a love of herbology and plants, that this is so important. There's organizations, Regeneration International has a ton of information talking about how we sequester carbon into the soil, that it is one of the massive, massive opportunities we have at reversing climate change, unlike anything else, even coming close to petroleum. But also open source seeds, open source technology, global justice and ecology. Moms Across America, the Cornucopia Institute also has a bunch of amazing large scale resources. And there's just people working on this, of course, all across the world. And knowing that it involves also policy change, it involves our science community and our education community, but also just the very real, tangible, we need to grow things moments. So would you like to add anything, Courtney, on that food for thought?
Well, you're so good at it. It's hard to find anything to add, but I do agree and support that. You said open source seeds, and I like that. It's the trading of seeds, the saving of seeds, but then it's also open pollination. So, but I do want to point out that this conversation to our regular viewers might be a whole new language to learn. And we respect that, and we hope that you don't walk away feeling like you couldn't understand. So please be sure to ask questions for clarifications if we move too fast with our jargon.
Definitely. And so I brought up this map. This is actually something that's really important to me. This is our organic field crops per acre in the United States. And it is on the rise, is the good news. And you can see where your state falls. I personally wish the Washington state numbers were higher. But it's really encouraging to see like that number in Texas growing up. And some of the other huge, I think like organic wheat production was up 8%. But we also have these opportunities for health and for hemp and for changing some of the systems that have, I would say, kept a non-organic biofuel, highly pesticide and toxic rich farming environment.
Input. Input reliant.
Yes.
Yeah. I do want to. Yes. And I think your map and this part of the discussion blends well with another question of Lael's. How do we reclaim that from, reclaim the food industry, basically, I believe, from the giant corporations who own the infrastructure and the power of, the dominant systems in the global resource market. And I say, though, we fight for policy that will make vast changes while we daily vote with our dollar. The more we remove our dollars from destructive agricultural systems and put our dollars to restorative, holistic land practices and the farmers practicing them, we can change by creating the demand. They can't hold on to the power if we don't give them the money for it. So empower your local food producers, your organic food producers, know about the politics behind your food.
And that is really important. It's actually an $8 billion shift in the organic industry. And we have seen that explode in the United States. We have seen health impacts related to organic and non-organic food. And that, for me, and especially my work with Moms Across America, is very important. As we started seeing such a nation of unhealthy people, and this pandemic has just exposed that more and more of how unhealthy we are, and that our dollars have not been spent wisely in making us a healthy country or having a whole healthcare system that represents that. So you can vote with your dollars. You can also vote with everything you purchase. Every time a barcode is scanned, that is a vote, and that is a very important understanding. We make those decisions every single day, and as restaurants start to reopen, you're going to also vote with your dollar of who do you support. Are they sourcing foods that you want to eat? You can go to some of the best restaurants in the country, and that does not mean it's organic. That does not mean it's free of pesticides, even if it's an amazing dish. And that's a conversation that we need to have. We need to, our resources are now all of a sudden very limited. And so we need to be very conscious about how and who we support. Are we actually supporting a small business, or is it a large chain pretending to be a small business? These are very real questions. And is the market responding to our needs? We've seen anxiety and some of the more mental health disorders overtake the obesity conversation that has guided our food production and manufacturing for the last 30 years.
We do have, I feel like it's a broader discussion to talk about nutrition specifically for health, but as it relates to this discussion, the quality of our food, how it's sourced, how it's harvested, especially when it comes to animal stress responses in the harvesting process, these things impact our bodies at a chemical level, and it is our right to demand better. And it shouldn't cost extra.
It shouldn't. And that's exactly where the subsidies come down. If you took away all of the subsidies that are given to commercialized crops and remove them, you'd find that they are 3 times more expensive than organic. And that's something that's very rarely talked about. One of the other things is we are electrical beings. And I just was reading a study today about the gut microbiome actually having electrical pulses. And, I was listening to John, he was talking about, the biotic movement. And I saw this hilarious little clip today that was like probiotic, antibiotic, as the little activist, the activist world of the dichotomy that we're fighting against in having better soil, and that soil nutrition and those soil microbes, and having a living soil that's breathing and alive, and it's not been deadened to the point where we can't bring nutrients from it, is really, really vital. We've got some great, amazing local resources here in Washington State for permaculture. Just a few of the ones that I've seen, and it used to be Seattle Tilth. It's now called Tilth Alliance. It's actually partnered with several other organizations. And I just saw they're doing an online plant sale, so that they've, normally all the garden clubs this time of year are having large plant sales, and they can't have those. So almost every part of the state, there is an amazing resource where you can not only learn permaculture, but you can engage, you can, take the pieces you need that fit in your life. And one of my favorites, which I know John has worked with, is Paul Stamets of Fungi Perfecti. And I know we have a clip somewhere that we were going to, a little bit of his movie.
Oh, please do. I love Paul Stamets. I'm a fungophile. He is one of my favorite, he's my favorite fungal person, but he's one of my favorite food production related people. And I feel so honored just to even be in the same state, because part of that means that whatever products he is producing and distributing, they're already acclimated to my region. So I feel lucky in that. And he's amazing. And when my daughter, I showed her a commercial, because we've been mushroom hunting since she was a month old. I showed her a trailer for this movie, and she goes, "We're going to see that, right?" And then she, throughout the whole movie, she'd throw out little commentary, and the people directly around us could hear, and they would, oh, like they were impressed, and they would giggle, and like, because at one point she said, they talk about psychedelic mushrooms and the benefits, and she goes, "I can't wait to do magic mushrooms." And so that's when the people around us had quite the laugh, and I was like, a part of me was like, yeah, because I'm in the movie moment, like, yeah, it looks, like real potential there. But then I'm like, oh, mommy moment. I should not reinforce an 11-year-old's anticipation for currently illegal substances.
But possibly soon legal. Oregon,
at least in states,
forward on that quite heavily. I was actually scheduled to go to one of the movie premieres here locally right before everything got shut down. So we're going to play a little clip of this movie, and I hope you guys enjoy it and can watch it and find it online.
My mission is to discover the language of nature, and I believe nature is intelligent.
There is a world under the earth, full of magic and mystery. It holds the consciousness of nature's connection to all living things.
These mushrooms, they can heal you, they can feed you, they can kill you.
It's not like a vegetable, and it's not like an animal, but it's somewhere in between.
They support life, they convert life.
As you're walking, there's about 300 miles of fungi
under every footstep that you take, and that's all over the world. The bulk of the organism is growing underground, and it's composed of these long threads called a mycelium.
Almost everyone knows about the computer internet. The mycelium shares the same network design.
It's amazing what we don't know about mushrooms. They really are a frontier of knowledge.
You can filter water. You can create medicinal compounds almost on demand.
They have incredible capacity to make things change very quickly. So I am super hopeful.
The psychedelic members of the mushroom kingdom are fascinating.
I have been a guide for around 350 psilocybin sessions.
The most glorious part was that it made me feel more comfortable with living because you're not afraid of dying.
We need to have a paradigm shift in our consciousness. What will it take to achieve that?
We can heal the planet. We can build the future. And our world is fantastic.
I just get goosebumps. We actually watched the full movie the other night. Then we went to watch some amazing other parts of the movie and discovered a few more. So, the mycelial world is just unlimited. It has so much potential for not only things like remedial, cleaning of toxic waste and nuclear waste, but also plastics and being able to eat microplastics, I've been told, and help clean up the ocean. But it's just really unlimited, and it's so not studied enough. It's not given its day, and I just can't wait for more of this information to come out. Oh. I think you're muted, Courtney. But I hear your words. They're coming.
Thank you. Thank you. I mute myself all frequently. And but what I was saying was that fungus is amazing, as Amber was pointing out. And actually, I can't pull up what I mumbled out while I was on mute because it escaped and I cannot retrieve it. So let's just move on.
No worries. Do we have any questions out there that anybody can see? Any resources?
I looked and it was a little bit more commentary so far. I saw a recommendation for small community-owned grids, electrical grids, which I'm a big fan of that idea, decentralizing our electrical grids and putting it all through green energy. We have the means to go completely green energy. We fail. We lack the political will. And that brings me back to what I was going to say about fungus, which is Paul Stamets has, I don't know, discovered, invented, manipulated fungus into producing a number of things, antibiotics, pesticides, a number, modified fungus to eat things that they weren't originally eating and break them down. And so the information is there, the capital will, the investment is not there, and that it's not strictly that there isn't enough interest, but also the industry that exists in those areas would see this as a threat, and so there's also probably a little social depression of the information.
Yeah, I have seen that. One of my favorite ridiculous things to do is to follow patent laws. And so what I see often is if there is a technology that could be competing against something that is garnering a large amount of income for, say, corporations, but actually is a solution to things, that those patents are bought up and then magically nothing happens with that amazing technology. And that's one of the things that I'm hoping with this great equalizer of a situation we are right now, that a bit of that can shift and that we can make some headway. I know many of us would like to see, I know it was mentioned before, but a larger hemp industry and turning some of our old sawmills and rural areas into hemp-based solutions. And that, basically everything that was ever made out of plastic, oil, or the oil industry can be made out of hemp, and that is a huge solution as far as changing the soil, using the combination actually between fungi and hemp in soil remediation after pesticides is huge. So I believe you have some pieces that you'd like to go into, Ms. Courtney. So hop on it.
I do want to point out that Jilly Love 101 and being a Courtney Love, I've always enjoyed your screen name. She says, "What's that called?" But I'm not sure what you're asking about, and I'm terribly sorry. But I want to go over my favorite quotes regarding permaculture, because I am often the person in a group who brings permaculture up and nobody's ever heard of it, and that's why I do it. So what's permaculture? Permaculture reduces inputs and maximizes output. So it reduces, what are inputs? Time, fossil fuels, sweat equity, and water, irrigation, in the standard systems, pesticides and herbicides and the like. So we reduce the inputs and we maximize output. What's output? Harvest. So the less you put in, the less cost it has for you, while maximizing your harvest. And so I just love permaculture. But so my second favorite, these are hardly ranked in order of preference. These are just my favorites. Toby Hemingway, sadly has passed away. He's a urban permaculture enthusiast, and I value his work to a great degree. And he says, permaculture is the action arm of the sustainability movement. So, I want to live a sustainable life. And, so like, how do we do that? We do it with permaculture. And then Ron Finley, gangster gardener out of LA. I've been following him for a few years. He's amazing. The first time he blew my mind the first time I heard about him. And my favorite quote from him is plant shit. Like, really, especially in an urban area, the boundaries of permaculture don't really exist. Like when we see the big, there aren't really boundaries of permaculture. It's more like, are these techniques considered permaculture? And in the large scale stuff, sometimes no. And we often talk about the larger scale stuff, but on the small scale, square foot gardening, gardening in pots. These are all things that can be considered urban permaculture. And so I consider urban permaculture having a broader scope of what can be called permaculture, considering what the community generally considers permaculture. But I do want to go into permaculture, start where you're at. So it's the next slide for you, Oz. Thank you so much. There are 3 permaculture ethics: earth care, people care, and fair share. So when those things are in harmony, we're set. And then there are 12 principles. And these principles, what I like about permaculture is that while we generally discuss permaculture in an agricultural or horticultural sense in food production, the permaculture principles can be applied to anything in our society, and it still provides a very reasonable. These are the best questions to ask of any project or community. So there are 2 slides for this, and we've got observe, interact. So my grandmother used to say, open your eyes before you open your mouth. So the first step to any project is just to observe. Then catch and store energy, obtain a yield. So what's your output? You know, it doesn't even matter what project, just what's your output. Apply self-regulation and accept feedback. Use and value renewable resources and services. Produce no waste. And I like to point out in the produce no waste discussion, closed loop industries. They're very valuable. And I want to see people discussing the closed loop systems and industries. They exist, we can promote them, and we can incentivize them. Then we've got design from patterns to details, integrate rather than segregate. So to me, that is aligned with, most of us know about monocrops, but very few of us know the language to use what's the opposite of a monocrop. We're looking for polycrops, things with multiple plant varieties in a single square foot. So you got to integrate systems and diversify your landscape. Use small and slow solutions. Use and value diversity. It's a great suggestion for plants. It's a great suggestion for people. Use edges and value the marginal. Edges are, think of the coral reefs. Those are edges. It's where life thrives. It's where saltwater and freshwater meet at the mouths of rivers and oceans. And this is where life thrives the most. We think of people at the edges as marginalized, and yet permaculture says edges and the marginal areas, edges and hedges, are of the greatest value. So it kind of twings my little hippie heartstrings. Yes. So and creatively use and respond to change. So flexibility is key, just like life. So I just getting through the principles. So I wanted to make sure we got an introduction to the ideas of permaculture and give a base for everybody. I'm sorry, it's a list of 12 that I just had to read out.
I love how we can see some of these principles apply in other parts of life and the work we do. And to me, that's the most valuable and the most important piece, is making those connections politically, professionally, at home, and in the world. You know, eat the weeds is one of my favorite pieces. You know, we talk a lot about eating the rich, but we ourselves want to be finding the nutrients in the weeds, because they are often more than the store-bought generic crap.
Exactly. And I like to say, in regard to weeds, that weeds are just friends whose names you don't know yet. because all those weeds have names. They have nutritional values. They have medicinal values. These are not unknown, unuseful plants. They're just not where you like to see them. So
And
any plant in the wrong place is a weed.
and as a principle of herbalism, that all of our pharmacopoeia once came from plants, and you see that over and over again. But we've made these disassociations as we've given up their rights to pharmaceutical companies and to patent law.
Yeah, and I'd like to preemptively say to people who poo-poo plant medicine, how do you feel about marijuana? How do you feel about cannabis? Is it a medicinal plant? Yes. Then why do you think dandelions aren't? Why is there a line drawn? So just remember to keep your mind open. And while there is like herbal habits, like lore, things we've kind of practiced for a long time and we maintain, and then wonderful universities like Bastyr, Bastyr. Sadly, I didn't get it into the rundown. It's a naturopathic university just north of Seattle, world-renowned, and they and other places around the world are doing plant medicine science that usually reinforces grandma's stories. So, and improves them. So keep your mind open. We have more to learn, more to prove, but there's no money in it. So it's slow going.
Yes, and I see some chat references to the Farmer's Almanac and the moon cycles, and bringing these back to these integrative systems that work in harmony together, and that we have often gone to this place where we have taken away their ability to evolve naturally. And when we remove the barriers and the obstacles, we find that they flourish and thrive. And so we are getting ready to cue up a clip. We actually, it was hilarious. I went to watch something else last night, and it happened to be an ad on YouTube. And it was a 2-hour ad, and we watched every bit of it. It was driving my daughter nuts because she's going, "Isn't this an ad?" And I'm like, "It's the best ad we've ever seen, and we're going to keep watching it." It's a local movie that actually features quite a bit of Washington State, having to do with dam removal, and and freeing our salmon. But it also just shows to some of the human interventions, and so how our thought processes in the natural world need to change and evolve, but also how freeing it is to see these systems restored, whether it's desert or a body of water or a polluted place. There's a magical power to seeing the earth retake something that has lost.
Yes. Now I'm going to call on you to help me fill in the blank because my mind is blanking out. But there is I think of it like homeopathy for land. I'll keep thinking, but I do want to shout out, thank you to Sharon for her, the verbiage of it. She chipped in a little financial support in our YouTube chat. So thank you so much. She says, thanks for the informative and inspiring live stream. But I'm trying to think of the term for, and he set up not Montessori, but Waldorf schools. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, Steiner.
Yeah. So it's not. Well, we'll come back to it, but it involves companion. Please, yes, companion planting by the moon, and also tricks and techniques to be used in your garden to reduce pest issues, and it's all natural. And I think it's a great. It's like, to me, the sugar coating of permaculture. Like it's in and of itself. I wouldn't say it's comprehensively permaculture, and I wouldn't say permaculture encompasses all of that, but together I really support them, and I hope Amber finds the word that I'm looking for.
I will do my best. In the meantime, please watch this trailer about the movie Damnation, the problem with hydropower.
I don't think FDR ever saw a dam that he didn't think should be built. It just really seemed like a great idea coming out of the Great Depression.
Like all constructed things, dams have a finite lifetime. And a couple decades ago, it was radical in terms of thinking that you could take a dam out. It was unthinkable. Go back 50 years, it was legitimately crazy talk. The conversation's changed.
The dams, both of them, were illegal to start with.
Elwha Dam has been achieving nothing for anyone for 50 years.
All of Indian country is here in spirit, and their eyes are focused on the people of the lower Elwha.
Taking a dam out and opening up a watershed, reconnecting it with the fish that were there for hundreds of thousands of years, it gives you, hope.
You can take half of a salmon fishery, eat it, and they'll keep replacing themselves. What kind of a species throws that away?
There are 75,000 dams over 3 feet high in the United States. That's the equivalent of building one every day since Thomas Jefferson was the President of the United States.
We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for protection provided by the hydroelectric dams for flood control and producing of cheap electricity.
Completely renewable, minor effects on the environment. As far as I'm concerned, if we had more rivers of this size, we could do more hydropower, it would be the best way to go.
We don't believe there's a big enough benefit to keep them there, and there's a huge benefit by taking them out.
You're asking some nasty questions when you ask about a free-flowing Snake River. It'd be a lot of teardrops of joy to see that river running again.
There's a great good here that belongs to the American people that's being stolen by a very small corrupt branch of the federal government.
Yeah, I would advocate sabotage, subversion, as a last resort in political means, man.
I think it's just fine for him to be a dam buster as long as he focuses on the right dams to bust, if you will, and that's not all dams.
Dam removal is happening. It's in the real world. It's happening, and it's not all that crazy anymore.
Anyway, so during the pandemic right now, you can watch that movie in full. It's fantastic. It features a lot of pieces of Pacific Northwest. And big shout out to Edward Abbey. If you have not read The Monkey Wrench Gang recently, highly suggest adding that to your reading list. It's super important. If you want to talk about environment at all, it's a very important piece of not only our history, but of how to have that, what is environmentally damaging protesters? Are you being an influential person, and are the things you're doing working, which is something that, having that reassessment and vision is always really important. But I see this lovely graphic coming up talking about urban permaculture. I know I personally have some chickens on order and got my garden started, of course, a long time ago. I'm making it larger than ever and adding some new raised beds to my existing plot of land where I tend as a renter. Tell us more, Courtney.
Okay. Well, I do want to say on the slide is a graphic of a hugelkultur bed. Don't be intimidated by the name. And it's basically a log-filled lump, and it allows for more square feet of gardening. However, you can dig the logs into a trench, so you have a flat hugelkultur with the surface of your land, or you can even hugelkultur a box. So it's a flexible. But this example shows you that it's logs within. Oftentimes, any turf that you've dug up can be plopped in there upside down, preferably, and filled with just any yard debris you have. But the concept is that the logs and the material within that little hill are like a sponge, and they hold water during the rainy season, and they release water to the plants during the dry season. So if you make your hugelkultur big enough, you won't have to water through the dry spell that Washington is increasingly having. So, but for urban permaculture, it reaches from your kitchen counters to cityscapes. So, if all you have is a few pots on your windowsill, you're doing it. Patios, do your whole lot. I had a 1/4 acre in Tacoma for about 10 years. That was incredible to have a 1/4 acre in the city. It felt like I felt like a landowner, like a real, like I had land to farm. So, and the average Tacoma lot is about 6,000 square feet, and I had almost 3 times that. So, but you don't have to have a lot of space to do it. You can do it anywhere. If you don't have lawn or soil at your disposal, create relationships with neighbors and people in your community, and food produced on somebody else's soil. Guerrilla garden if you have to. Shh, I didn't say that. Yes, I did. And then, but also the cityscape. And so as somebody who's into policy, I'm always looking for, can we create a city program? Can we scale up? Like, I like gardening outside my door and with my neighbors, but how do we make a bigger impact? How do we, do the less plateau event in Tacoma? Like, I want big scale action. I will accept smaller scale action wholeheartedly. So Amber, any feedback on that part?
Yes, I just wanted to put out biodynamic is the word
Yes.
You were missing the other day or a few minutes ago with
Earlier.
Rudolf Steiner, which if you haven't read about Rudolf Steiner, maybe, you don't have children and you're not into the Waldorf world. He is a fascinating individual on a number of different levels, from consciousness and the cosmos to, gardening. And so the Biodynamic Association is actually one of the most amazing resources out there. It is, to me, like in the UK, they have the Soil Association, and that is like USDA organic on steroids, where they're actually going out and testing the soil, testing the water, and checking to make sure that you have clean resources to grow things. And when we get into those details, the biodynamic is also taking that work and making sure that you are doing no harm, that it's got some esoteric concepts involved in it. It stresses the biological methods that you're using to grow something. Is it ethical? Is it causing any harm? And is it incorporating some of these other aspects into it? But there's a lot that you can do. I know for myself, I have kids at home, and so my daughter's actually looking at doing a gardening show where she wants to have her own media show much like this. And also she's got some very politically minded comments of her own that I'm letting her work out on her own. But you can
I don't know where the kids get it these days.
Yeah, in fact, I was trying to get ready for the show, and she spent half the time trying to take her sister's GoPro from me so she could go start her show immediately. But we've got opportunities. We've got neighbors. We have this opportunity. We've talked a lot about, becoming a PCO and how you involve in that. But there are ways in which you can engage in your neighborhood to make sure everybody is growing the food they need in a very slow and small scale, if not large. And for myself, being a renter, I'm going to be using raised beds that are up off the concrete in my driveway that I can actually take with me when I move, kind of thing. So it's not, or vertical gardening. When I lived in Southeast Alaska, I did almost all 100% container gardening. So there's just really simple ways that we can do this, in a variety of settings, apartment to, large plots of land. Or maybe we need to start a Washington-based eco restoration camp. I see we're missing on that map, and that, I know many of us
I can't believe that
needed that place to live and commune. So opportunities abound. I hope you guys all check out all the links in the rundown. We've got a ton of information, and we're going to be going into another, let's see, we've got your slides here talking about animal husbandry. Like I said, the principles.
Yeah, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say the principles of, like, I've been in some gardening forums and chats, and people are like, oh, what do I do about slugs? And, you know, we're very lucky in the Pacific Northwest that we do have pretty amazing soil and water. And when we take some of these principles and apply them in places, I know in Alaska, we've been able to grow amazing things in the permafrost and in hoop houses in very challenging conditions, but also food storage is also important. I think especially this year, as we look at our situation, that going to the grocery store twice a week is just really not a feasible thing, or a place that our society should have gotten to. So it's going to be interesting to see how we take advantage of this.
Exactly. And so regarding animal husbandry and further urban considerations, as it's titled, there, you know, on the large scale rural permaculture, if you don't deadhead plants, you're just reseeding, and that's fine and recommended. It's a part of the techniques of permaculture. However, in an urban center, we have other things to consider. One of them is curb appeal. And so at the very least, at the front of your yard, the street side, a little bit of pruning and maintenance might be more applicable than the standard permaculture chat might lead you to understand it to. And another thing you have to combat is urban wildlife. You're not allowed to shoot critters in cities usually. I'm in Tacoma, so my perspective is of Tacoma. And when it comes to raccoons, we're allowed to trap them on our property, take them to the very edge of the property and release them. We're not allowed to transport them. We can't make our problem somebody else's problem. So this isn't a real solution. And the solution, after a decade of just putting myself in permaculture space, it's get a dog. Dogs will alert you to animals, chase them off. I also found that when I did have a dog and 14 fruit trees and 20 berry bushes and et cetera, that the only time I didn't have a problem was when we had a dog. And then after we adopted an aged dog, and after she passed, the raccoons still didn't know she was gone. They didn't come into the yard by habit for probably a year. So it's a lasting, but really your dog is your best solution to urban wildlife issues. Animal husbandry, that will actually have laws, and then permaculture will offer you best practices. So one of my pet peeves, because of my engagement with permaculture, is urban chickens that are stuck in a coop and run and are not let out very often, are stuck standing in their own waste product, don't have access to fresh forage on the regular. And so if you're going to keep animals, make sure that their life is better than if they were on their own. They should not be standing around in their own feces. And permaculture and the resources in our rundown in the description box below, richsoil.com, it's the largest online permaculture site you can get. And the guy who runs it, I get this pet peeve from him. So he has a lot of information on there specifically about chickens and how to manage their waste without having to shovel it. So I need to get it out right up front. But in an urban setting, if you have a large yard or a yard with food that produces food and attracts urban wildlife, that means you have an attractive nuisance. Again, the dog is the solution, because it will increase we have to be like, oh, permaculture is awesome, I just want to be happy, glowy, purple hippie vibe on this. But the real issues are it increases risk of rat issues, and it will draw in raccoons. Coyotes live in my urban area, so there are real issues that you have to be prepared to deal with. and what the solutions are, preferably before you have the problems. But on the plus side, you are creating neighborhood abundance. And so share with your neighbors, share with your food banks, and the more soil you plant, the more abundance you create.
Can't agree more.
Yeah.
That is awesome. Yeah, there's, we got to be real about what really happens out there, and that it's, backyard farming until it's backyard slaughterhouse, which we don't want. We want things to live.
I will eat my chickens.
Safe. So, I got good questions out there.
Let's see.
See any Oz? I'm just looking through everybody. And thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you so much for John for joining us this evening. We look forward to working with you more in the future and our worldwide quest of making the planet better and our soils happier. We have a very special video. If you guys want to think of questions, maybe this will inspire some. This is one of my personal heroes, which is Jane Goodall. And John will be introducing her for us, and we'll get to see her vision of a new planet from quarantine.
Friends, hello from sunny California. As many of you may know, I've been trapped in California. Not the first time that I've been here, but the first time that I've spent any significant amount of time here. And I wanted to share with you parts of what we were able to do during the live stream, which we had on the 18th, and to tell you that we're planning a series of other broadcasts, and I hope that your networks can all be part of this, because I've noticed that the media is struggling with this particular issue, and that there needs to be another level of communication, one which is more profound and more nuanced and more focused on positive action that we can all take at this time, rather than fear and confusion. So here's something from Dr. Jane Goodall, who's one of the big influences in my life, and she joined us on the 18th. Here is what she had to say. Thanks for listening. Here's Dr. Jane Goodall.
Hello, this is Jane Goodall, and I'm really happy to be able to say a few words. I think this ecosystem restoration camp is a fantastic idea, and it truly is only if we all get together that we can begin to get the planet out of the mess that we humans have created. And I realized back in the 90s that unless we work with local communities around areas that we're trying to conserve, then it just won't work. It's their land. And so the Jane Goodall Institute began its Takari program back in '94. That's a very holistic way of doing community-based conservation. And as we help people to find ways of living other than destroying the environment, well, then they began to understand that saving the forest, of course, I'm talking about the forest around Gombe, where I was studying chimpanzees from 1960, and we still are today. We couldn't even try to save the chimps if the people were starving and struggling to survive with overused farmland and more people than the land could support. So that holistic program truly began to work. And not only do the people understand, but we've given them the tools. They can go into their forest reserves where most of the chimps are, and they can use smartphones. They go to workshops. They're very proud. And everything is transparent. And the forest around the Little Gombe National Park is coming back. The people have benefited. The chimpanzees have benefited. And this we're doing in 6 other parts of Africa. Well, we've also developed around the world our program for young people, empowering them, listening to their voices. And in our Roots and Shoots program, kindergarten to university and everything in between, now in 65 countries and growing, the main message is every single one of us makes a difference every single day. and the groups choose projects to help people, animals, and the environment. So now we face this COVID-19 coronavirus, and this has been predicted for a long time. We've known that it could come again, and we know the reason. It's when viruses jump from animal hosts to humans, and we've create the conditions where this is most likely to happen, moving further into animal habitats, crowding them together, viruses jumping from one to the other, animals coming into greater contact with humans, allowing the viruses to go from them and cross the species barriers into us. And we're hunting them, killing them, eating them, trafficking them. We're selling them for food in crowded places. We're breeding animals, domestic animals, as though they're mere objects created simply to give us food, not the sentient, sapient beings that they actually are. And the more we learn about animal sentience and animal intelligence, the more we realize the inhumanity of the way we're treating them. So to get ourselves out of this mess, we have to put one big word in front of us: respect. Respect other people. Respect people's right to their lives. Respect animals. Respect the environment. And I think that what you're all gathered together to talk about, separately gathered because of the virus, is really important. And it is only when we all respect each other, get together, work together to heal the planet, that we can avoid the next pandemic, which could be worse, and we can also slow down climate change. So good luck to everybody. I wish I could be there for the whole day, but I've got so much to do in my little lockdown here in the UK. So I just say bye to you all, and I must give the distance call of the chimpanzees I know so well as a farewell to all of you. And John, it's great to be working with you again. Bye, everyone. Good luck. Stay safe. Stay well.
Oh, she just gives me goosebumps. She's so cute.
I was on mute saying, she gives me goosebumps with her chimpanzee call.
I know. I'll expect every one of you to be out practicing that. Do we have any questions on this last segment that we've run? I would love to answer anything. I hope you guys all see the resources in the rundown for links so you can follow up, watch some of these amazing movies and content, and also larger vision about what we've been doing. We have ways in which you can get a hold of us and keep in touch with us. So one of the things we have is tomorrow is going to be our monthly statewide Washington call. And I'm not sure if you have a chance to see that, Oz. It's on slide number 20. And our special guest tomorrow night at 7:30 Pacific time is going to be Representative Pramila Jayapal is going to be joining us. And so this is our normal meeting time for our Revolution Washington. We meet every Sunday at 7:30. And this next one, once a month, we will have a statewide call and really more of a just huge check-in, organizational, see, really some of the highlights that's happening in Washington State. We're very excited to have Pramila with us. We're also going to be having Deborah Parker, who is an Our Revolution board member and Washington State tribal member and leader in many amazing ways. And we've just got a lot of ways that you can connect with us. We're busier than ever. I understand, Jane, having too many meetings. It feels like we're all being Zoom meeting to death lately. So time management, make time for your garden is my biggest point on that. Would you like to add anything on that, Courtney?
Oh, I don't see any questions, and I agree with all of what you've said.
I love it. Well, I guess next we can show you our next slide, which is how you can connect with us and find us. So you can support our show. We do have an ActBlue account. This is our tiny URL, or WABAC 99 cents. We like to say 99 cents for the revolution. However, after we came up with this amazing thought process of everybody donating a penny, or 99 cents, 99 pennies, that $1 is the minimum you can donate on aggregate. But one extra is all we're asking. Yeah. It doesn't take much. We are not in this for the money, obviously. Yeah.
99 cents for the, spirit. Yeah, 99 cents for the 99% and one more for good measure.
Yes, for the future, for our children.
Yes, indeed. Pay it forward.
You can also find us on Rockfin. Thank you to everybody. Shout outs for everybody who donated on the show tonight. Very much appreciate it. We've got amazing things happening with Uphill Media. You might have seen our Daily Dive show recently. I know Barbara Bartleson has. But we're also going to be starting out on Rockfin, which is really exciting. There's going to be some premium content that's going to be available there. So highly suggest that. Huge shout out and thank you to Oz, the man behind the curtain, and Franklin for helping monitor and restream over all these platforms. You guys are awesome. So we have our statewide call tomorrow. There is a slide that shows that date. It's on a couple down, Oz. We phone bank every Thursday for our revolution. Bernie may have dropped out, but the revolution is continuing, and his issues and platform are more important than ever. And all candidates are having a hard time filling delegate spots. So I'm very proud of Washington. We did an amazing job, but there's still states out voting. And so now more than ever is time for a rebirth in these concepts, creation, and ways in which we can shift the dial in the change that we want to see in the world. We also are our Monday through Friday, just organizing meetup every day. We are just connecting at 11 a.m. Pacific just to check in, see how you're doing, talk about our next show, talk about what's happening in your communities, and support each other. So
yeah,
we'll
be building and releasing a little bit of a schedule for our daily meetings. We're looking at starting each day with, if you have tech questions or asks, whatever time of day that is, Oz is reliably available. That's when it will be, so that you can connect with him during a known time frame. We'll have time set aside specifically for chapter leaders, that kind of thing. Right now, it's just join us and say what you got to say. But we hopefully will be creating a little more structure so that you know when to aim for, depending on what you're coming in for. And then also feel free to schedule time to discuss within that time frame or outside of that time frame if you need to discuss specifics, and not just for if you want to go strictly to work on something, scheduling with us is very easy to do and very welcome to do.
Yes, thank you so much, Courtney. We've got a lot going on, and we're busier than ever. And we invite you all inside, outside, all the things we are working on. We've been very fortunate to have an amazing one of our artists has been creating songs for us, and that is Miss Sharon Brave. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, before we go, that I do want to say, so our asks of this show are to phone bank within the state with us, phone bank out of state for Bernie, and plant gardens every day.
Yes.
Is that okay? Good. Just wanted to give
very
this
important. Everybody knows what our ask is, and support your community. So we've got all these issues that are more important than ever. I want to say again, shout out, thank you to John D. Liu and his amazing body of work and continued connections across the globe and ecosystem restoration camps, as well as our many volunteers and supporters out there. Thank you all for participating with us. Hope you're all out checking out Fair Vote, Whole Washington, the Incorruptibles, and we do have more shows, more town halls every Saturday night. Hope you can join us.
I think what's next is anti-corruption.
Yes.
I love it.
Wait,
I mean, for real.
and we happen to have May 1st just right around the corner. There's lots of actions to be taken on rent strike, on a general strike, on union organizing, and more. So please stay in tune, stay in touch, and be well.
Oh, and there's discussion about Sasquatch in the chat, and I'm from Washington, and I've never seen Sasquatch, but I know it exists.
and sadly, the music festival does not exist anymore. And I hope we get back to a day and age of many music festivals.
Yeah, I interrupted as you were going into discussion about Sharon, and she deserves a few words.
Yes. So Sharon Abreu is our musical muse at the moment, creating us amazing songs. And she has been an environmental activist and songwriter, singer-songwriter up in San Juan Islands, and wrote this song. And we're going to play it as we exit out through our slideshow. Thank you so much, Sharon, and hope you all enjoy. Have a great evening.
Thanks for being here.
Hi, we are Sharon and Mike, the Earthlings duo, coming to you from Orcas Island, and this song is called Blue and Green.